Hi, I'm Sarah. Welcome back to my channel where I talk about my journey to sustainable health and meaningful success. Today, we are just jumping into a one-shot kind of story. I'm not going to be editing this. I'm just getting it out there because this story is the one that kind of prevented me from coming back to YouTube like months and months ago because I'll just get into it. This is basically how I got my dream job. I quit. And then I got a $10,000 raise, and then I got fired. And I've felt so many mixed emotions of like shame and anger and disgust in this whole situation that I feel like I just need to talk about it. And honestly, it may be kind of stupid for me to talk about this because it was a job in the mental health field, and I would not want to jeopardize any future opportunities in the mental health field. However, I have always been about honesty and authenticity and vulnerability. And I think that being able to acknowledge some mistakes that I made and also just kind of talk about this, and I don't know, I've never been like one to be silenced for negativity or, well, no, that's not even the case. I have been one to be silenced and needing to be in like a toxic positive space. And that was the whole thing about Amway that I think that I really needed to steer clear from in future situations. So I think that this is just kind of going along that same vein of being able to own the truth, nothing but the truth, my side of the story, and just get it out there. So anyway, without further ado, let me talk about what my dream job was, or what I thought my dream job was. So I am a certified health coach, and I just recently graduated with my master's degree in clinical mental health counseling. And what drew me to the mental health field in the first place was with coaching clients in health coaching. I found that a lot of the underlying reasons for people overeating or just having the same like coping mechanisms that lead to destructive health patterns were things that they were coping with because of underlying mental health things, especially trauma. And so that was why I wanted to study it more. And so when I was preparing to graduate, I got this job as a facility manager at a residential eating disorder clinic for adolescents, specifically assigned female at birth adolescents. So we had a lot of female and non-binary young patients, kids, an incredibly vulnerable population with eating disorders. Obviously, when it comes to the higher level of care, like residential, and like the next step would be inpatient, and we didn't have a feeding tube, but other residential facilities do have feeding tubes to force feed patients. You are talking about not only an advanced level of like severity with regards to like the mental health condition, but also they are experiencing some really severe physical symptoms of their disease. So not only are they young kids, age 11 to 21 was our facility, but also incredibly vulnerable with all of the things that they were dealing with. So I wasn't a counselor, I was going to be like the operations manager. And basically the way that they had restructured their program, because the person before me had also gotten fired. So they restructured the program to have a program director and then the operations manager. And then on a separate, like on that same plane of the hierarchy, there were 2 therapists, a dietitian, and a nurse administrator, and other like nurses. So that was kind of like the treatment team, but they had restructured that with the program director on the top, but the facility manager, AKA the operations director, was basically just given a different title, but not really restructured a lot of the the responsibilities, which was really burdensome because in my first week, basically I had 2 days of working a 10-hour shift, and then my boss, the program director, took a vacation for a week. So I was considered facility leadership, and there was really no authority structure outside of that. So people were going to me with like questions about patient care and the facility, and it was literally day 2 of my position. Not to mention the fact that I was working 30 hours a week until I graduated. And then once I graduated, then I switched to full-time, and I was on call 2 days a week, Monday and Thursday. It was like Sunday night at midnight to Monday night at midnight, and then Wednesday night at midnight to Thursday night at midnight. I was on call for any emergencies, in addition to being a part of the weekend rotation, and like fully in charge of like the new admissions and all of the different like kind of like, I don't know, the clerical end of things, in addition to facility management. So all of the safety, like repairs, maintenance, audits, all of those things, any sort of, new supplies that we need, or anything regarding the facility whatsoever, was in my charge. And then literally the first month that I was full-time at this position, my boss also had to take family medical leave of absence. So it was like a partial FMLA. So every day at 11:30 a.m. she would leave, and I was the person in charge. So it was an incredibly steep learning curve and a ton of responsibility and liability with regards to our patients being residential and things being like overnight. We had a water heater burst and our water was off for 24 hours, and they didn't evacuate anything. Like the patients just had to make do, and we were, manually evacuating the toilets, and it was a lot. Also, just kind of like to add to a little bit more context for eating disorders, if you're not familiar, there's a lot of like comorbid diagnoses with eating disorders. So people who, if you're in a place where you're medically required to be in a residential or inpatient facility, it's typically a restrictive eating disorder, either like anorexia, bulimia, and any of the other eating disorders under that umbrella. It was typically those kind of eating disorders, where a lot of our patients also dealt with just the surrounding symptoms of that. Like there's a lot of manipulation and secrecy and self-harm that patients have to battle with, in addition to the food aspect of eating disorders. And the comorbid diagnoses are often things related to trauma or depression, anxiety, and like bipolar personality disorders. Like borderline personality disorder was a really frequent comorbid diagnosis that we would see. So a lot of what we were monitoring were concerns about those kinds of things, like the self-harm and the like desire to harm, not just harm oneself, but like unalive oneself, I guess is the internet approved phrase of it. So there was just a lot of liability and heaviness. And so for my position, I mentioned that I already was like managing the facility and all of the repairs, and there were a lot of them that I was juggling. I mean, day one, there was a towel in front of the refrigerator because there was a consistent leak. I don't think our refrigerators and freezers were really at temperature, like serve safe temperature, through the entire course that I was there, which was incredibly dangerous. And I don't know how the facility had passed Joint Commission in the first place, but the kitchen was like barely functional and not clean, not labeled properly, like crazy amount of work to be done in food organization. And then like the roof was falling apart. Our front steps and all of the steps leading up to the facility were crumbling because it was brick and all of the bricks were loose. We already had an employee fall on one of the steps, and then I witnessed one of our young patients almost fall on the front steps. And so trying to get those kind of repairs approved was a nightmare. And like our water heater broke, like I said, there was mold growing in the bathrooms at one point. We had major electrical stuff that was like, had not been, basically, since the person who was fired before me basically didn't do the job, especially on the maintenance end of things, the facility really hadn't been physically addressed in like over 2 years, which was, there was a lot of wear and tear on that facility. In addition to that, I was the person who coordinated with the education liaison for all of the kids that were in school during that time. I was part of the treatment team, and I was like the supervisor of the technicians, and the technicians were the people who basically from start to finish would, you know, do all of the meal prep, all of the, you know, patient supervision, and like they were on the floor all the time, outside of like when the kids were individually pulled for like different individual sessions for like dietitian and therapy. So anyway, not to mention the fact that I was the person with like one of the highest responsible people in terms of like the hierarchy of who to go to for what problem. I was the lowest paid member of the treatment team. I found out because one of our therapists quit, and so there was a job posting, and I found out that she was paid like $10,000 a year more than I was, even though she had like 4 patients because of the capacity in our facility. A full caseload was considered 4 patients, where you would have 2 individual sessions and 1 family session per week. So you were doing 12 sessions per week. And she frequently would say that she had nothing to do, or that, you know, she really wasn't busy. She would just kind of sit at the dining room table and like be on her laptop pretending to be busy. And she even said that to a patient. So that was kind of like the workload on that end. And so she'd like come in at 10 a.m. and then leave at like 2 p.m. So real relaxed for other people in the treatment team. But I was stressed. And I did not figure out until much later, much too late in my employment there, that I needed to shut off communication. After, you know, I left work, I needed to extremely minimize the kind of notifications that I would get, because I felt like I never was able to leave the job when I was on call, because there wasn't like a set standard, like you have to call for emergencies. You cannot just text or Teams when you have a question. And there was an incredible like reliance on having 24-hour, like 24/7 support from leadership. That wasn't empowering to the technicians to be able to do their job sufficiently and independently. But it also was incredibly draining on the leadership that had to be like available all the time, even when not at work. So all that being said, that was kind of the stress of the job, in addition to the fact that I was only paid $54K a year in Illinois for a master's degree position. Apparently you only needed a bachelor's degree for that position, but I was shocked with how much consideration there was for like clinical treatment. I think it was a master's degree position, and that was why I eventually was able to, you know, convince the powers that be in the position that it was worth at least a $10,000 raise. And I did get that $10,000 raise, but they gave it to me on the day that I gave my 2 weeks notice. Like, I gave my 2 weeks notice, and they're like, oh yeah, well, we did just get approval for that $10,000 raise. So I had already kind of reached a breaking point at that point. And the reason for the breaking point was not just the workload. I mean, working in mental health is incredibly stressful just as it is. It leads to burnout as it is. But there were some things in this position that I don't even know if I have time to get into, but basically, we had technicians who were showing these children a strange amount of favoritism, giving personal gifts, volunteering or like not even communicating that they were just going to stay past their 10 p.m. shift cutoff and just work overnight without letting anybody else know. And they would hold different like little cliques, and they would you're working with a bunch of teenage girls, but they would engage in the teenage cliquishness and somewhat like mean girl kind of behavior. We had it got super messy, and I don't want to like talk about specific instances, but there were some times where like there was one time when I woke up at like 5 a.m. Normally when I go to bed on something and I'm like upset about it, I'll go to bed and I'll wake up and I'll have processed it a little bit more and I'll feel a little bit better about it. But I woke up at 5 a.m. and like I was disturbed in my spirit because the whole picture created this big picture of we could be a hotbed for somebody grooming these kids. And this was after I found out that an employee was going to meet up with these patients outside of their scheduled work time for their restaurant exposure. They would go once a week to a restaurant and have to, you know, kind of be exposed to that environment while they're challenging their ED behaviors. But this person who had already been flagged and already been written up a couple of times for these exact reasons, she was going to then meet up with these kids outside of her scheduled work time just to hang out. And it was like, oh, we're having way too much connection and way too little boundaries with this. And then another thing was and she would frequently work overnights or just stay past her shift. I mean, the person did not have a clear boundary between work and personal life. And then there was another person, there was a nurse, overnight nurse, that we had a parent email us about the kind of conversations that the nurse was having with these underage kids. I mean, her 13-year-old daughter had told her mom, and then the mom wrote us an email saying, the nurse would like take us into the nurse's office, and we're part of the cool group, so like that's cool, but she was talking about like the size of like male genitalia and talking about orgasms and polyamory and talking about body modification surgery, which is like, why would you talk to eating disorder patients about your tummy tuck or your Brazilian butt lift, and physically lift up clothing and pull down clothing to show scars from those procedures. And not to mention, she would tell the patients, well, you're not really sick enough to be here, but you're here anyway, but you're not really sick enough, which is crazy on the treatment aspect of things. And so that was reported, and the person was like asked about it by HR, and HR, like, she basically denied that she said any of that. And it was like a verbal warning, which I had personally, as like the operations person, like walked into the nurse's office once and saw this same nurse with two or three of the patients in the nurse's office, which there's no reason to have a group of kids behind closed doors ever at all, especially in a residential facility. So just crazy inappropriate behavior. And that was kind of just like, that was why I was sickened by it. I felt like I could never emotionally detach from the job, even when I wasn't at work. So speaking about emotionally detaching from the job, my lunch break is probably up, so I need to go back to work, and then I will resume this story with why I got fired. Okay, so we're back in a different part of my apartment. This is my dining room, and I apologize if you can hear the piano person practicing upstairs. that is just a reality of this apartment. I think the people upstairs are like a piano teacher, and so there's different levels of piano playing going on throughout the day. So anyway, but basically, to end the story as to why I got fired. I had reached my breaking point and submitted my 2 weeks notice, and then I got notified that I was in fact approved for a $10,000 raise. And then I still was feeling like I really don't know if that would actually make a difference at this job, because I am tired all the time. This is like an unsafe place to work, and I really was not feeling well about how we were managing patient safety. In addition to the increased stress of, like, this was a for-profit medical facility, which meant that, number one, we had quotas and like different things that we had to meet in order to be like profitable. And the system of diagnosing someone, keeping them there, proving for insurance reasons that it's medically necessary for a patient to be there, just got messy and kind of challenged my morality at times. Not to say that they were doing anything explicitly like wrong. It just was really tough to, tell a patient and their family that, it was medically recommended that they stay at our facility for a certain amount of time, even if them staying at the facility was not doing them the best that it could be. Like, they were not thriving as well as they could have been had they been able to like step down to a lower level of care or transfer to a different facility because of, I don't know. I mean, the transferring to different facilities, a lot of that you have to know whether or not a patient is just trying to manipulate and get out of the situation because they realize that they can't, fully be in their ED behaviors at a facility like this, and then they think that going to a different one they would be able to get away with more. So there's that, but just the whole system of having to diagnose and encourage people to stay in a situation that may or may not actually be medically necessary or beneficial to them was tricky. So there was a lot of reasons why I wanted to leave. Just specifically though, and especially because I was not able to mentally separate myself from the job. And so that was kind of like why I quit. So the $10,000 a year more was like, okay, that improves my quality of life financially, but how can I make the quality of life different at the job itself for me to be able to like sustain that? But the thing is that on the day that I submitted my 2 weeks notice, I vented to the wrong person. And I basically because I was the supervisor of the technicians, I thought I was not close as in like friends, but I thought I had better rapport with this technician than I guess I did. And so I actually was trying to encourage her, like, hey, this position actually only, this position only requires a bachelor's degree, and if you already have your bachelor's degree, I think you should apply internally for my position. I was trying to encourage her. Well, here I was now, kind of oversharing my information about, I don't know, I probably did say I'm not paid enough for this shit at some point, which was objectively, in my opinion, true, and actually in the company's opinion true, since they agreed to give me $10,000 more. But by saying that and by telling this technician what I was paid, that definitely did not sit well with her. It didn't sit well with HR. And so, yeah, I was asked about that by HR, and I'm like, well, I'm pretty sure that that's my federally protected right to be able to talk about my compensation. But yes, I did talk about my compensation with one person. Yes. Oh, that was a mistake. It was a mistake to tell her in the beginning. It was a mistake to vent to anybody at work about my woes, and about my concerns, but you know, that was the mistake that I made. The thing that I actually got fired for though, because I was correct. It's a federally protected right. You cannot be fired or face any consequences for talking about your compensation. So that wasn't the reason why they cited for me getting fired. There was a situation where, as the facility person, I had delegated one of the technicians to lead a fire drill. We had done fire drills before. Every month we have to do a fire drill, and each shift rotates per month, which will do fire drill. So they were familiar with the fire drill, and the fire drill literally took 2 minutes. You got to grab the emergency backpack, you got to round up all the patients and everybody, get them out to the evacuation spot, which is across the street, and they have to do a head count. And that is all. It literally takes 2 minutes. And in the midst of that, this was back in like the dead of winter, where we normally, like, the patients have to take a walk, or like we take patients for a walk, the patients who were cleared to do a little bit higher movement than just like basically couch rest. And so this was the first like nice enough day. It was above the feels like temperature was above 25 degrees. And so it was the first opportunity in like 3 weeks that these patients had to go outside. And so I had asked, and this is like part of the job. I wasn't asking them to do anything outside of what their job was. But I just said, okay, so we'll just do the fire drill, because they had set the time that they wanted to do the fire drill. I'm like, all right, so we'll just do the fire drill. And then one of you can stay outside with the emergency backpack and take the patients who are cleared to go for their 20-minute walk. And then we'll just lead all of the rest of the patients back inside. And they weren't even like talking to me about why they couldn't do that. They were talking to each other about how, you know, maybe we should just push the walk off until, you know, the PM shift and all of that. And it's like, no, that's a designated time in the program schedule to do that in the AM shift. And we can't push it off to the PM shift, because the PM shift have their own schedule that they have to keep and their own responsibilities, and they don't have the benefit of treatment team being here to help with that. And I also just kind of like, I guess, I don't know, tell me in the comments if you think this was wrong of me to say, but basically I was really transparent with them, and I just said, you know, corporate is saying that technically, because the treatment team is there during the days, that we only need one AM technician to be here. We have 2 AM technicians for the AM shift, and we need to prove that we're able to keep the schedule based on those AM shifts, or like based on having 2 AM techs. And I even clarified, like, I'm not saying that your job is on the line or anything, or that we're going to cut one of your positions. I'm just saying that we have to be mindful that we have to follow the program schedule, especially because we have 2 technicians, and we want to prove that we're able to keep up with the program schedule with 2 technicians. Like, we want to be successful in that. Mind you, the patients were in the basement. They were with the education liaison who was helping them with their homework. No patients were upstairs at the time. They didn't witness this conversation or anything like that. But after I had been terminated, I asked for my file, because I was so confounded by like the idea that I would be fired for something that I had said. What was on my file was that the reason for termination was that I had said, allegedly, I had said to the technicians in front of patients, hey, just so you know, your job is on the line, so you better do what I say. So that was a bold-faced lie. That wasn't what I said at all. That certainly wasn't the tone in which I said it. I did say it in a rushed tone because patients were about to come up the stairs. It was literally 10 minutes before the education block was done, but I certainly did not say that in front of patients, and I did not say that their jobs were on the line. In fact, I said the exact opposite. I said, I'm not saying that, you know, your positions are like on the line. I'm just saying that we need to do our best to succeed with the staff that we have. Crazy. That was a lot. So, and all of this time, you know, I guess they asked every single technician about me, and any moment of vulnerability that I had said, yep, you know, I've faced my own burnout here and I'm learning to have like better boundaries and stuff. Anything that I had said, it was twisted to say something like, it made my character out to be like some person who literally would only talk about her personal problems or only talk about what she needed to have going on. And it just was like entirely false from how I had treated the job. I mean, I don't know. And it almost feels like talking more about how much I cared about the job and how much I cared about each individual technician and making sure that their needs were met and taking initiative to, you know, making sure that they had a better break room to actually take breaks, because they weren't taking 15-minute breaks outside, like off the floor. Before, they were just like counting, you know, sitting with patients for meals and snacks as their breaks, which is not a break because you're monitoring patients and you're engaging with patients. So it's like all of the different things that I was trying to do with, you know, making their jobs better. I feel like talking more about that is like kind of like not the point, basically. It didn't matter how well I did my job in terms of trying to get the facility back up to standard, or how well I did my job in trying to protect patients from predatory behavior and also from like facility dangers. And it didn't matter how well I did my job in terms of making sure that the technicians were advocated for the moment that I vented, I guess. I don't know really if it was, I don't know what specifically it was that kind of initiated that venting about the job and saying, you know, I don't get paid enough for this and I need to find something that, you know, will actually pay me for the position that, or for the education that I have, which I don't even know. I don't know what I said. I don't know how I said it. I just know that I was talking in the person's best interest and saying like, I think you should go for it if you want this job. And maybe she did. Maybe she wanted the job, and when she found out that I actually had rescinded my 2 weeks notice, then she's like, but you already told me that I should have your job, so maybe I need to report you to HR. I don't know. It's really crazy though that that the things that I was bringing up to HR, like, hey, I'm really concerned. This technician gave this underage girl a book that is literally like erotica. This same technician was also giving like expensive gifts and was bringing flowers for the patients and being really like specific and like having a lot of favoritism with who she would give gifts to and who she would spend time with. And she would even like bash other technicians to the patients and kind of play into that drama. Like all of those things and that was the same technician that was going to, you know, associate with the patients outside of her scheduled work time. And she was also someone who would be scheduled for a 40-hour work week. And then somehow, like, until I started really looking into her timesheets, somehow she had been working like 50, actually she was scheduled for 32 hours and she would work like 50 hours a week plus. And some of them were, a lot of the shifts were actually not approved. She wasn't previously approved to stay on for additional shifts. She would just stay on the clock. And previous management had not been catching that. And then with the nurse and the kind of conversations that she would have, like the fact that these things were not fireable offenses, yet what apparently on paper is the reason for why I was terminated was something that I actually did not say, and there were witnesses. Like, my boss was right there, and I even brought it up to her later, saying, like, was I too harsh? Like, did I say something wrong? And she's like, no, you were being honest. Like, you said we have to do the best with, you know, what we have, and this is the standard that we have to meet. Like, no. So the fact that even my boss was there, and it just was like, I don't know. But that's the situation. I was so embarrassed and so heartbroken to be fired. But honestly, like, I'm so much more mentally at peace now that I'm not working that job. And I don't think things would have improved. I think that things would have been so much worse. Like, sure, I turned off some notifications and told people to please call me if there's an emergency and I'm on call, but it's on call, not on text, for a reason. So please call me. Like, I think that may have improved some things, but I guess it was just that I had reached my breaking point. And perhaps, like, really honestly, even though my intentions were, you know, pure, sometimes your intentions are not the actual, like, outcome of your actions. And so, you know, I can totally take accountability for the fact that even though I may have, you know, been all heart and all love, the stress of the job may have broken down my boundaries to a point where I didn't even realize when I was being inappropriate. Even looking back, hindsight, and trying to be as objectively as possible, I don't think that I was inappropriate. But again, I may have been just really not taking care of myself and not even keeping myself in check. So that was that situation. I don't know if I'll ever be in the mental health field again, simply because I'm not able to pinpoint, like, oh yeah, wow, I really messed up, I should have been fired. Like, because I'm not able to pinpoint that, I only think of those times when I was vulnerable, and not with patients. I never said anything with patients, but with the people that I was supervising, like the technicians, the fact that I may have said some things about burnout and just, you know, kind of led with vulnerability. Like, one of the leadership books that they were reading was Dare to Lead by Brene Brown, which is literally about leading with vulnerability. So, you know, the fact that I was vulnerable and was authentic and was myself and saying, you know, hey, I need to take care of myself. You need to take care of yourself. Like, it takes a lot to do this job. And the fact that that would have been punished or somehow looked negatively upon, is almost putting a standard where mental health practitioners or people who work in the mental health field are not allowed, or not allowed to show their humanity. And that's not to say that, you know, mental health practitioners or teachers or anyone in a position of authority over a vulnerable population, of course there should be boundaries. Of course there should not be a lot of personal disclosure about what's going on in their lives, because that's not why they're there. But I think having a little moment of, like, realizing, like, wow, I need to take care of myself, and I will lead by example, and I will tell, you know, the people who I manage that I too am working through making sure that I'm able to have good boundaries at work. I feel like that's what I look back on and think that maybe my vulnerability was taken advantage of, and then phrased in such a way as though I had no boundaries at all with them, which was just not the case. And maybe they just didn't like me. I know that entering into that position, there wasn't really a lot of leadership. It was just kind of a free-for-all. And that was why these younger female technicians who were almost close in age, like if we had a 17-year-old patient and a 22-year-old technician, like, there was a little bit more crossing of boundaries in terms of like, they saw each other as their peers. And so when I was in the position and had so many like strict, like, no, you're going to clock in within 5 minutes of your start of your shift, and you're clocking out within 5 minutes of the end of your shift, because we are here to, you know, work, and we're here to have professional boundaries. Like, I think that that rubbed some people the wrong way, and maybe they really did not like me for that. And it's hard not to speak as though I'm painting myself as the victim of this situation, when honestly, I do feel like this situation was like unjust. But potentially for the best anyway. Maybe they have a healthier work environment now, and maybe I was not the right fit for the position. But I know for certain that I have a healthier work environment. I have a healthier mindset, and literally the job that I am being paid now is only $4,000 a year less than what I was originally being paid at that job. And I get to clock out at the end of the day and not think about work past 5 p.m. And that is a gift that I will not readily give up anytime in the foreseeable future. So anyway, all right, thank you for listening to my long rambling stories. I'm sorry for all of the switches. My phone keeps like running out of battery, and so then I have to like clear storage out and keep rambling. So I'm sorry about that, but that's my little story, and I will catch you next time for the next upload. Make sure to subscribe and hit the notification bell so that you can hear me jabber on again. All right.